So in this video, we are going to look at the basics of JSON. So all of the JSON files, if they are files, they all have an extension called .json, unsurprisingly. In the smallest JSON file, I mean, it can be an empty JSON file, although that's totally useless. Other than that, the smallest one can contain a single thing, let's say a number. So to demonstrate, I am just going to create a new JSON file. So I'm going to say new file. I'm going to say it's a small JSON file. And PyCharm actually has a built-in support for JSON file. So I can just say put a number there, and yeah, and that is a legitimate JSON file. It's not terribly useful. So let's look at a JSON file that is a little more practical and contains more useful information. This is an example I pulled down from Wikipedia. One thing you can kind of tell immediately is that this file it contains information that are very, very human readable. Right. So let's look at it kind of line by line to see what each of these things are. So you can kind of see right away that at the beginning and at the end of this JSON file, there's the curly braces. Now, what the curly braces in the JSON format or specification is that it signifies the beginning of an object. And then the matching closing curly brace, obviously, it signifies the end of that object. And now you can understand why I don't necessarily like the word object, because it's everybody used the term to describe something generic. But anyway, so between a pair of curly braces, it's a JSON object. Okay. And now in a JSON object, there are attributes, actually attribute value pairs. So these are kind of like in a dictionary, the key value pairs, but they call it the attribute value pairs. So these pairs, they are separated by colon. Okay, so between the attribute name and the value is separated by colon, and each attribute pair, they are followed by a comma, and then another attribute value pair, another attribute value pair, until the very last attribute pair, and the last one doesn't have a comma at the end. So if you look at, like, this is the last attribute pair in this JSON object, and this one doesn't have a comma. Everything else has a comma followed at the end of the attribute value pairs. Okay, and now the name of the attribute, which is the thing before the colon, that has to be in quotes, and not just any quotes, but double quotes. Okay, remember that. The name of the attribute must be in double quotes. Now, as far as the values go, the value can be of quite a few different types. So it can be a number, it can be an integer, it can be a floating point number with a decimal point, and that sort of thing. And obviously, it can be a string. And again, if it's a string, it must be in double quotes. Okay, not single quote, must be in double quotes. It can be the type, other types, elemental types, such as Boolean. It can be true or false. It's lowercase true or false. Okay, and it can be null. As we kind of can see here, and null kind of just means nothing, an empty value. Or it can be another object. Okay, it can be, remember, this is an object, right, between curly braces. It can be another object, such as, it's something like this, right? And it can be an array, which we'll get to in just a moment. So let's first look at what it means that the value of an attribute can be another object. Okay, so JSON is what's called hierarchical. Okay, so and that means the value of that attribute can be another object or an array. So this can help us to express something that is very complex. So say, for example, in this case, for a person, the person has a first name, last name, and those the the value for those attributes, they're fairly straightforward, right? Now, what about address? Well, address is something more complicated because address can be made up of several different attributes, such as the street and the number, right, and the city and the state and the zip code and all that. So, in order to kind of group all of these different things into a single thing called the address value can be then another JSON object. So in here, you can see that inside this JSON object, it's another bunch of attributes that have the corresponding values. And so that's what that means. Okay, moving on. All right, what about if we want to store multiple values of something? For example, right, phone numbers, most people nowadays, they might have multiple phone numbers, right? They have their cell phone number, might not have a home phone anymore, but maybe have an office phone, work phone, right? So in order to store multiple information of kind of the same type, like phone numbers, JSON also supports storing things as an array. So array, you can think of it as like a list as well. So and it's an array is between a pair of square brackets, okay, versus, remember, for an object, it's between a pair of curly braces. So an array is between a pair of square brackets. Being an array or a list, obviously it can contain multiple elements, and you can kind of see here each of the element is followed by a comma, except the last element doesn't have a comma here, and the value for each of the element can be any kind of legal JSON value, which can be a number, string, another object, which is what it is in this case, or another array. An array being an array, it can have one or more elements, or it can be empty. In this case, for this particular person, he has an empty array of children. Few other things I want to mention about JSON is so the attribute value pairs in JSON objects, they are what's called unordered. So you can specify, in this case, we can specify first name before the last name, or in a different object, we can specify the last name before the first name. These two are considered the same because the order does not matter. But that is different from the arrays because for JSON, the array, they are ordered. So if we, for the array of phone numbers, if we specify the office phone number before the mobile phone number, in this case, and then in another array, we specify the mobile phone number before the office phone number, these two are not considered the same array. Even though, sure, to a human being, we might think, oh, they contain exactly the same information. But as far as the JSON definitions are concerned, these two, when you do an equality test, they are not equal because the orders of the elements are different. So now that you have seen an example of what a JSON file looks like, I would like you to get a little practice of writing one yourself. And so remember, PyCharm has a decent JSON editor as long as your file has an extension of .json. So go ahead and create a file called mypics.json in PyCharm, and the content that I would like you to put in this JSON file is from the New York Times movie critics pick page. That it has a bunch of movies that I guess the critics like, and so for each of these movies, well, I would like you to create at the top level a JSON array that contains all of these movies, and inside this array, use one object to represent one movie. So you're going to have multiple of these objects, and for each of these objects or movie, include the information that are interesting to you. Maybe include things like a title, a publication day or opening day, or something for summary, that sort of thing. Okay, so pause the video, give this a try, write some JSON. All right, so assuming you've done that, here is my file. I mean, it just only has 2 entries. So, I mean, remember, we start with an array with square brackets, and then for one object, it kind of, represent one movie, the title, Bakura, and the summary, and the date, and then another title, the Wild Goose Lake, and summary and date, and so on and so forth. So I assume you probably had something like that. All right, now that we have done this ourselves, wouldn't it be nice if we can actually see what the official New York Times JSON is for their movie critics pick? And as a matter of fact, you can look at what the official JSON is if you sign up for a developer's website and use one of this API. So I'm going to show you just quickly how this is, what it looks like. You don't necessarily have to know how this works. We'll actually get to a little more information next time. So this is their developer's website. I already signed up for an account, and I already authorized my API, get an API key, and I authorize it. And so this is one of their ways. I promise, explain how this works in a later video. But anyway, so let's actually go through the JSON, and we can try the API, try to get it. I think I already have it. So I execute it, I actually retrieve, and this is the JSON of all of their critics pick. So I already copied this over to PyCharm. Let's see, I have it here. There. Now, as with everything official, if you look inside their JSON, it's a little more, has more complexity, has more information. So, for example, obviously they have to put something like a copyright on it. Their critics pick, it's actually over time they've probably hundreds if not thousands of results, so they don't want to give you all the results all at once. There will be too many. So now it's giving you 20 results, and then in the results it's in another array, and in each of these each object in this array would then represent a movie. So it has the title, has all these other information, headlines, summaries, publication date, opening date, all the links, and all the media files that actually represent the movie and that sort of thing. And yeah, I'll attach the file to the video, and you can take a look at this file yourself.